Imagine risking everything to protect your own family, only to end up inside one of the most brutal prisons in the country. A place where human life has no value. The strong prey on the weak, and every single day is a fight to survive. But what happens when an ordinary man refuses to break and decides to fight back? Stay until the end, because this story will keep you on the edge of your seat. The story begins with an ordinary man named Wyatt Potter, who worked a modest job to support himself. His life was not filled with wealth, but it was peaceful and content. He lived a simple yet happy life with his girlfriend Laura and their young son Michael. Wyatt and Laura shared two dreams. The first was to get married and build a better future together. The second was to invest some money and start a small business. To make those dreams come true, Wyatt applied for a bank loan. When the loan was approved, Laura was overjoyed. They truly believed their lives were finally about to change for the better. However, fate had something else in store for them. One night, while the entire family was asleep, a strange noise suddenly woke Wyatt. His heart filled with fear as he sensed something was wrong. He quietly woke Laura and grabbed a baseball bat for protection. Their first concern was their son. They carefully walked toward Michael's bedroom. Fortunately, Michael was sleeping peacefully in his bed, safe and unharmed. Feeling slightly relieved, Wyatt asked Laura to stay with their son. Gathering his courage, he began searching the house. He cautiously checked every room for signs of an intruder. As he stepped into the kitchen, a stranger suddenly emerged from the darkness and attacked him. Before Wyatt could respond, the intruder turned and ran out of the house. Fueled by anger and adrenaline, Wyatt chased after him without thinking. Consumed by rage, he struck the fleeing man on the head with the baseball bat. The blow was so powerful that the man collapsed to the ground, struggling to breathe. Only then did Wyatt realize the man had died. The shocking reality left him devastated and overwhelmed with guilt. Soon afterward, the police arrived at the scene. Wyatt hoped the incident would be treated as self-defense. However, one of the officers saw the situation differently. He argued that the attack happened outside the house rather than inside. Because of that, he believed it could not legally be considered self-defense. The situation quickly turned against Wyatt. He had only wanted to protect his family, but everything was slipping out of his control. The investigation made things even worse. The police found that nothing had been stolen from the house. As a result, Wyatt had little evidence to support his claim of self-defense. Both Wyatt and Laura repeatedly tried to explain what had happened. Unfortunately, the authorities refused to accept their explanation. Wyatt was arrested and charged with murder because the fatal blow was delivered outside his home against an unarmed man. His nightmare truly began the moment he entered prison. On his very first day, he accidentally made eye contact with a dangerous inmate named Tinto. Tinto took this harmless mistake as a sign of disrespect. Although Wyatt meant no harm, prison was not a place where innocence mattered. Surrounded by violent and intimidating inmates, he felt completely helpless and alone. The following day, Laura came to visit him. She told Wyatt that Michael kept asking when his father would come home. Those innocent questions broke both of their hearts. Laura encouraged Wyatt not to lose hope. She promised to hire a skilled lawyer and do everything possible to get him released. Her words gave Wyatt the strength to keep going. Even so, the road ahead would not be easy. A short time later, a lawyer assigned to his case met with him. She explained that his situation was far more serious than he realized. If convicted, he could spend many years in prison and face a financial penalty of up to $1 million. Wyatt was stunned because he had never imagined dealing with such an enormous amount of money. Even so, the lawyer assured him that she would fight hard to prove his innocence. That same night, San Quentin prison erupted into chaos. A violent clash broke out among the inmates. Within moments, the entire prison turned into a battlefield. The fighting and shouting became so intense that the guards were forced to use tear gas to restore order. After a long struggle, the violence was finally brought under control. However, the riot changed the lives of many prisoners. One of them would become especially important to the story. The next day, a man named Gordon arrived at the prison to visit an inmate named John. Gordon informed John that because of his involvement in the previous night's riot, he would likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. Surprisingly, John showed no emotion. To him, life and death no longer made any difference. At that moment, he had only one wish. He simply wanted to celebrate the birthday of his son, who was no longer alive. In the past, John had been a cheerful and loving family man, but a tragic accident took away his wife and children. That heartbreaking loss destroyed the person he once was. Since then, John had stopped caring about his own life. He had taken revenge on the people responsible for his family's deaths, and that was the true reason he ended up in prison. Meanwhile, Wyatt's lawyer visited him once again with a difficult proposal. He explained that if Wyatt admitted his actions in court, both his prison sentence and financial penalty could be greatly reduced. This was not an easy decision because Wyatt believed he had never intended to kill anyone. However, thinking about his family and having no better option, he finally agreed to follow his lawyer's advice. Wyatt confessed in court. As a result, he was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 3 years in prison instead of facing a much harsher punishment. On the day he was transferred to another prison, a man named Jake was sitting directly behind him on the transport bus. Jake quietly warned Wyatt that a dangerous inmate named Denny Sampson was also on the bus. He told Wyatt that getting on Sampson's bad side could cost him his life. Before Jake could finish speaking, Sampson suddenly stood up and stabbed another prisoner to death. Panic instantly spread throughout the bus. Before anyone noticed, Sampson secretly slipped the blood-covered knife into Jake's hand, Jake immediately realized he was being framed. If the guards found the weapon on him, he would be blamed for the murder. Terrified, Jake secretly pushed the knife beneath Wyatt's seat. He then glared at Wyatt and warned him not to say a single word. He threatened that Samson would kill him if he revealed the truth. Once again, Wyatt found himself trapped in trouble through no fault of his own. When the transport arrived at the prison, officers searched the bus for the murder weapon. The knife was discovered beneath Wyatt's seat. As a result, he became the prime suspect and was placed in solitary confinement. A prison officer named Lieutenant Jackson aggressively questioned Wyatt about the incident. However, Wyatt remained silent because he feared Samson's deadly threats. His refusal to speak only made Jackson even angrier. As punishment, Jackson transferred Wyatt to the prison's maximum security unit, which he personally controlled. This decision marked the darkest period of Wyatt's life. The unit housed the prison's most dangerous inmates. Most of them were serving either life sentences or awaiting execution. The rules there were extremely harsh and inhumane. Prisoners were locked inside their cells for 23 hours every day. During their first 3 months, they were not even allowed to meet their loved ones. Living in such isolation left Wyatt feeling completely alone and emotionally drained. One day, the guards escorted Wyatt to an area where several large and intimidating prisoners had already gathered. The atmosphere felt tense and unsettling. Without warning, 2 inmates began fighting each other in a brutal and bloody battle. Wyatt expected the guards to stop the violence. Instead, he was shocked to see that no one tried to intervene. The guards simply stood back and watched as though this kind of violence was completely normal. In reality, it was an underground gladiator-style fight arranged inside the prison. Lieutenant Jackson and the guards watched the battle from a distance for their own entertainment. They even placed bets on which prisoner would win. After the fight ended, the guards fired rubber bullets to break up the remaining violence. Witnessing this horrifying system, Wyatt realized he had entered a living nightmare. One prisoner eventually grew tired of Jackson's cruel treatment. He openly challenged Jackson in front of everyone. His bravery came at a terrible price. The guards dragged him into a locked room. Inside, Jackson beat him so brutally that everyone who heard it was terrified. That moment revealed Jackson's true nature. Every prisoner feared him after witnessing such cruelty. Several days later, Laura was finally allowed to visit Wyatt. After waiting 3 long months, they finally saw each other again. Both of them struggled to hold back their tears. For a few moments, neither of them could speak. Sadly, Laura had heartbreaking news. She admitted that she no longer had enough money to support herself and little Michael. Hearing this devastated Wyatt. After thinking carefully, he suggested that Laura sell their property so she and Michael could survive while he remained in prison. Meanwhile, another major change took place inside the prison. John, who had received a life sentence after the San Quentin riot, was transferred to the same prison. By coincidence, he was assigned as Wyatt's cellmate in the maximum security unit. At first, John tried to befriend Wyatt. However, Wyatt wanted to stay out of trouble and quietly kept his distance. The following day, the inmates were called into the prison yard. There, Wyatt met Jake once again. Jake thanked Wyatt for staying silent about the incident on the prison bus. He explained that Samson now trusted Wyatt because he had not exposed anyone involved. Without realizing it, Wyatt had earned the trust of one of the prison's most powerful and feared inmates. Wyatt also noticed that many prisoners already knew John. Although some were reluctant, they still treated him with a noticeable level of respect. In reality, John's reputation as a violent and fearless inmate had spread across several prisons. His behavior was so difficult to control that prison authorities kept transferring him from one facility to another. That troubled past followed him wherever he went. Because of his years of surviving behind bars, John slowly began teaching Wyatt how to stay alive in the brutal prison environment. One day, Wyatt got into a fight with a powerful inmate named Turner. At first, Wyatt seemed completely overpowered and looked certain to lose. However, he gathered his courage and fought back with determination. Against everyone's expectations, Wyatt defeated Turner. The prisoners were stunned by his unexpected victory, but what happened afterward shocked everyone even more. As a young officer named Collins prepared to fire a rubber bullet at Wyatt, Lieutenant Jackson suddenly stopped him. Instead, Jackson ordered Collins to shoot Turner. Collins hesitated because the order made no sense. Enraged by the hesitation, Jackson grabbed the weapon himself and fired at Turner. Wyatt was horrified by the officer's cruel and senseless decision. He could not understand why Jackson would do such a thing. Sensing Wyatt's confusion, John calmly explained the harsh reality of prison. He told Wyatt that the guards made their own rules. Inside those walls, their decisions were treated as absolute law. They could protect anyone they wanted or destroy anyone without consequence. A few days later, a government investigator named Hammond arrived for a routine prison inspection. His sharp instincts quickly told him that something was wrong. Hammond directly questioned Jackson about the frequent violence inside the prison. He asked why so many fights continued despite Jackson being in charge. Fearing that the truth might be exposed, Jackson confidently claimed that everything was under control. He promised to reduce the violence and maintain order in the future. For the time being, his lies successfully hid the corruption inside the prison. However, the truth could not remain hidden forever. A few days later, Laura returned to visit Wyatt. This time, she brought little Michael with her. Michael was overwhelmed with happiness after finally seeing his father again. For Wyatt, that reunion became one of the few joyful moments during his imprisonment. imprisonment. Sadly, Laura once again brought difficult news. She explained that they had completely run out of money and were struggling just to survive. Although Wyatt felt helpless, he comforted Laura. He suggested that she sell their house so she and Michael could manage until he was released. Wyatt promised that once he returned home, he would give them the happy life they deserved. His family remained the only reason he continued fighting through each difficult day. After Laura and Michael left, Jake approached Wyatt. He ordered Wyatt to participate in a fight taking place in the prison yard. When Wyatt refused, Jake's attitude changed immediately. He signaled his men to attack Wyatt. Within seconds, Wyatt was surrounded by several inmates. The fight became so violent that the guards were forced to release tear gas to stop it. During the chaos, John stepped in alone and fought off Jake's men to protect Wyatt. Later, John scolded Wyatt for refusing Jake's order. He explained that Jake, just like Samson, was a powerful prison gang leader. Making an enemy of someone like him could easily cost Wyatt his life. Only then did Wyatt realize how dangerous the situation had become. Meanwhile, outside the prison, Laura had no choice but to prepare to sell their home. She planned to move in with her mother so she and Michael would have a place to stay. Back inside the prison, Wyatt was summoned to meet Samson in the prison yard. Jake was already waiting there. Jake complained that Wyatt had disrespected him by refusing his orders. He demanded that Samson punish him. Instead, something completely unexpected happened. Rather than punishing Wyatt, Samson gave a signal to his own men. Within moments, they killed Jake. Jake's lifeless body fell to the ground. Samson then calmly invited Wyatt to become part of his gang. The shocking offer left Wyatt deeply unsettled. After returning to his cell, he asked John whether accepting the offer would be the right decision. John advised him to accept. He explained that Samson was one of the most powerful men in the prison. Remaining under his protection would greatly improve Wyatt's chances of survival. The following day, Lieutenant Jackson and Sergeant Roberts attended their children's baseball games. During the event, Roberts warned Jackson that the continued abuse of prisoners could eventually expose them. He urged Jackson to follow the prison rules and stop mistreating the inmates. However, Jackson was blinded by his pride and authority. He believed no one would ever uncover his crimes. Confident in his power, he continued ruling the prison with fear and cruelty. Later that night, Wyatt asked John why he had spared the people responsible for killing his family. John's answer left Wyatt speechless. John explained that he had intentionally kept those men alive. Instead of killing them, he targeted their loved ones. He wanted them to experience the same unbearable pain and loss that had destroyed his own life. It was a horrifying form of revenge. A few days later, Laura returned to visit Wyatt. This time, she could no longer hold back her emotions and broke down in tears. She admitted that she could not continue living under the weight of poverty while raising Michael alone. After saying those painful words, she stood up and walked away without looking back. Wyatt was left overwhelmed by anger, sadness, and helplessness. Meanwhile, another inmate suddenly attacked Wyatt in the prison yard. Broken by everything he had endured, Wyatt made no attempt to fight back. Jackson, who enjoyed watching violence, became furious when the fight failed to entertain him. In anger, he fired a rubber bullet at the attacking inmate. He then pressured Wyatt once again to reveal the truth about the knife incident involving Samson. However, Wyatt remained silent, still fearing Samson's threats. Frustrated by Wyatt's refusal to cooperate, Jackson decided to take revenge. He falsely testified in court that Wyatt had been involved in the prison murder. Because of Jackson's false statement, Wyatt received an additional 3 years in prison. As if that were not enough, another heartbreaking blow soon followed. Influenced by her mother's advice, Laura sent Wyatt a letter ending their relationship. The emotional pain completely shattered him. Unable to control his anger, Wyatt began fighting other inmates for no reason. John tried to calm him down and warned him not to let his rage consume him, but by then, Wyatt felt that all his hopes had disappeared. After losing Laura, he believed his life no longer had any meaning. The following day, Gordon came to visit John once again. This time, however, John asked his loyal friend not to visit him anymore. He believed that every visit was pointless because nothing would ever change. Meanwhile, outside the prison, Laura and her mother packed up their belongings. As Laura began packing Wyatt's personal items, little Michael walked in. He innocently asked why she was putting away his father's things. Laura gently explained that they would no longer be living with Wyatt. Hearing those words broke Michael's heart. He loved his father deeply and desperately wanted their family to stay together. Seeing her son's pain and his unconditional love for Wyatt changed Laura's heart. She immediately regretted her decision. Without wasting any time, she returned to the prison. She told Wyatt that she would wait for him until his release for the sake of their family. Hearing those words filled Wyatt with hope once again. For the first time in a long while, he believed there was still a future waiting for him. Excited by this renewed hope, Wyatt shared the news with John. Together, they created a dangerous but carefully planned strategy. Their goal was to expose the corruption inside the prison, reveal Jackson's crimes, and prove Wyatt's innocence. To begin the plan, Wyatt asked Jackson for permission to fight a newly transferred inmate. By coincidence, that inmate was Tinto. Wyatt pretended that he wanted revenge against Tinto for the suffering he had caused earlier. Jackson, always eager to watch violence, immediately approved the fight. However, he added one terrifying condition. The fight would continue until one of them died. Meanwhile, following John's advice, Wyatt asked Laura to meet Gordon. John believed Gordon was the only person capable of helping expose Jackson's crimes to the authorities. At last, the day of the fight arrived. A brutal battle erupted between Wyatt and Tinto. Wyatt struggled through the intense fight with everything he had. At the same time, outside the prison, Laura, Gordon, and Investigator Hammond headed toward the facility. They were determined to uncover the truth about Jackson's cruelty. Meanwhile, John quietly prepared for what might happen next. As a precaution, he had secretly hidden a homemade weapon. After a long and exhausting battle, Wyatt finally defeated Tinto. Even after winning, he refused to kill his opponent. Despite everything he had suffered, Wyatt chose to hold on to his humanity. Jackson was furious because he wanted the fight to end in death. As Jackson raised his weapon to shoot Wyatt, John instantly stepped in front of him. He placed himself between Wyatt and the gun without hesitation. John's courage inspired the other prisoners. One by one, they also stood beside Wyatt. For the first time, Jackson realized he was losing control over the inmates. As tensions continued to rise, Sergeant Roberts quickly intervened. He warned Jackson that killing so many prisoners would destroy both their careers and their lives. Realizing he had gone too far, Jackson had no choice but to back down. He ordered all the prisoners to return to their cells, bringing the violent confrontation to an end. But the peace did not last for long. It was only the calm before another storm. Jackson had no intention of accepting defeat. Shortly after John and Wyatt returned to their cells, a guard arrived and ordered them back to the prison yard. Jackson was waiting for them, filled with anger and determined to destroy Wyatt once and for all. This time, Sergeant Roberts could no longer ignore what was happening. Unable to watch another act of cruelty, he quietly stepped aside and turned away. Meanwhile, Officer Collins made a brave decision. He secretly switched the prison's surveillance cameras back on. His hope was that Jackson's actions would be recorded and later used as evidence. Just as Jackson was about to carry out his plan, John acted without hesitation. In a split second, he attacked Jackson with the concealed weapon he had been hiding. Jackson was critically wounded by the sudden attack. Before John could make another move, another officer opened fire. John was fatally wounded. Even in his final moments, he stood beside Wyatt and protected him until his last breath. Officer Collins immediately activated the emergency alarm and called for the other guards. At that very moment, Laura and Gordon arrived at the prison alongside Investigator Hammond. The moment of truth had finally come. With the help of Laura and Gordon, Investigator Hammond uncovered the corruption, abuse, and illegal actions that had taken place inside the prison. The evidence exposed Jackson's crimes and revealed the truth behind Wyatt's case. As a result, the court overturned the unfair punishment that had been imposed on Wyatt. After enduring 15 months of suffering behind prison walls, Wyatt was finally released. Outside the prison, Laura and little Michael were waiting for him. Overcome with emotion, Wyatt embraced them both with tears of joy. At last, after everything they had endured, the family was reunited.